Are you trying to learn Spanish but feel stuck? I went from nothing to being able to comfortably hold conversations within just a few years whilst juggling a full-time job and far too many hobbies. So in this video, I'm going to show you the exact steps I'd take if I started over, plus the biggest mistakes so that you can avoid them and progress faster. No digo que no pueda mejorar mi español, claro que sí, pero ya disfruto del contenido que me gusta, tener conversaciones con nativos y hablar de un montón de temas sin problema. Así que vamos con el punto primero. So that you know where I'm coming from and so that you can steal what actually worked, let's start with what I did right first of all. Now, first and foremost, I bought a good pair of headphones and I set a daily goal, at least 2 hours of listening a day. That sounds like a lot, but if you travel to work or you've got chores to do, like for me, it's walking the dog, that time racks up really quickly and you'll probably do even more. So Spanish became the soundtrack to my daily life. Not just anything though. Material designed for learners that I could start to understand, even if I had to listen to it a few times. We'll cover some creators to listen to in a second, but listening was the backbone of what I did first of all, and it made all the other things fall into place. Constantly hearing similar sentence patterns over and over just ingrains them in a way that reading about rules in a textbook doesn't. I didn't have hours a day to sit at a desk watching content, so I would try and fit Spanish into my daily life wherever I could. If you wait for the perfect moment to start, you'll be waiting a long time. So I would listen to content specifically made for learners that was super basic. So Dreaming Spanish, Spanish Language Coach, eventually Handy Spanish amongst other creators. And there are loads more now. So like Andrea la Mexicana is great, My Daily Spanish. Initially, you might have to watch the videos, but after that, you can listen to the audio for them in order to review the materials. With all the exposure, I picked up words and phrases without even trying. And I know some people can be skeptical, but if you get a constant daily input, it really works. I also tried a more structured course, so Ollie Richards' Spanish Uncovers. It was helpful early on when I was just getting started, though I have to say, I think a huge amount of my progress just came from all of that listening. Now, at first, I didn't even speak. Instead, I did something called crosstalk. So I spoke English to my partner, who spoke back to me in Spanish. If I didn't get it, they'd explain in Spanish or screen share image searches so that I could still follow. And it was genius for understanding real conversations. Just ask a tutor or a conversation partner to give it a go. So I did that for nearly a year before I started speaking. And then later, I added reading, starting with graded readers, which are books made for learners, before eventually moving on to native materials that I could translate on my iPad. When I eventually did start speaking, I would speak a lot. Multiple conversation classes a week and talking to myself. So these days, I also journal in Spanish to improve some of the gaps and try and push my level. Essentially, lots of input and eventually lots of output does a great job. Personally, I didn't focus on studying with textbooks or memorizing lists of vocab. And I'll add that at some point, you have to jump into listening to or watching native content. If you understand zero, it's still too hard, so wait a little longer. But eventually, you have to step out of your comfort zone of stuff made for learners into things native speakers actually enjoy. So Luisito Comunica is great for this. His content is addictive and it is easy to follow. Even if you don't understand every single word, your brain will slowly fill in the gaps. And before we get into what I could have done better, there is one crucial lesson about pronunciation that I want to share. Oh, and if you want a detailed summary of all of the tips here, as well as other resources that you can use, click on the link in the description or use the code on screen now. When I first started, I noticed that jumping between different Spanish accents made it way harder to understand people at first. My brain struggled to catch up with the variation in sounds. But when I focused on just the Spanish from Spain, the sounds were more consistent between different speakers, so my brain didn't have to struggle so much. And whilst I'm not going to fool anyone that I'm from Spain just yet, my accent isn't a mix of lots of different countries, which might sound a bit strange. So to make your life easier, personally, I would recommend focusing on exposure to content from just one country at first. Get comfortable and then branch out later. And whilst we're on pronunciation, one tip that really helped me. In Spanish, we put the emphasis on the vowels rather than the consonants, which is the opposite to English. So if you took the word hola and you pronounce just the vowels rather than having the strong L sound, it should sound more like oa, oa. So, hola, not hola. Try it yourself and you'll sound way more natural. You can practice by doing some reading out loud or play with the emphasis on the vowels or the consonants. Honestly, after hours and hours of listening, you'll start to get more of an ear for the language anyway and what sounds natural. If you want to be super precise on it, you can get into accent training. So your brain often can't always hear every sound in a new language. And so training your ear can help. There is a channel called 10 Minute Spanish that goes into that if you're interested. But for me, it's all about opportunity cost. There are only 24 hours in a day and other activities might have a bigger impact on my Spanish. That is very much a personal choice though. So that's the things that I got right, but let's look at the mistakes I made so that you can try and avoid them. So there is a thing in Spanish called the subjunctive. Now, do not worry. I'm not completely going to go down that rabbit hole, but there was some advice that I ignored and I wish I hadn't. So the subjunctive is a way of talking about certain things in Spanish, desires, hypothetical things, etc., etc. We won't get into that, don't worry. The thing is, the subjunctive isn't some advanced grammar thing that rarely comes up in Spanish. It is used in everyday conversations all the time. And also, if you're playing the English subjunctive drinking game with this video, I'll be using the rarely used English subjunctive later on. Anyway, I once heard Professor Patsy Lightbound say that when your native language doesn't have a certain feature, it's much harder to notice and learn it in a new language. So in retrospect, all those hours I spent listening to Spanish, I would have been hearing the subjunctive all the time. But because my brain didn't need to notice when the last letter of the word changed from an A to an E in order to understand it, you just tuned it out. So if I could start over, I would look at the differences in conjugations between the subjunctive and what we call the indicative, which is what you might think of as like normal Spanish. So that way, instead of having to go back and learn it later, I'd already have noticed it thousands of times, making it feel more natural, even if I did need to do a bit of polishing on it later on. So don't stress about mastering it instantly, but it is harder to notice something that you don't know exists. So get familiar with what it looks like and you have a better chance of using it yourself. And I know Clau from Classes con Clau has some straightforward videos on it to get you started. So now let's look at something which would have improved my speaking sooner and saved me some very awkward conversations. There is a lot of talk about whether you should start speaking a new language right away or wait until you've had more exposure so that you don't pick up bad pronunciation. I took that advice to heart and I waited until I'd racked up 900 hours before I started speaking. I could understand almost everything in a conversation, but when I finally opened my mouth, I couldn't get the words out smoothly. Conversations were very awkward as I slowly found the right words. So in retrospect, I wish I'd started trying to speak earlier. Here's the thing. If I were to have started speaking sooner, something like the 10-minute Spanish pronunciation videos would have kept me on track, or even just asking my crosstalk partners about maybe a few tricky sounds could have helped. That said, my accent isn't terrible, so maybe holding off speaking can work. Instead of jumping straight into conversations and feeling overwhelmed, speaking to yourself is a great low-pressure way to get started. And these days, talking to an AI is a game changer to bridge that gap. I use Langua, which I'll link below, but it gives you corrections and suggests more natural ways to say things. Without a real partner there, you can take your time. Even go and make a cup of tea if you need it. There is no pressure, and that can help you to build your confidence when it comes to having your first conversations. But there is one thing that I wish I'd done that would have helped even more. Okay, so this whole learning a language on your own thing doesn't happen overnight, and the risk is that you feel pretty isolated. My friends and family aren't going to share my passion for learning Spanish. But let's be honest, it takes commitment long-term to make real progress. So for me, finding community tutors on italki has been great because rather than them trying to teach me the language, I can just chat without any stress even if I make some mistakes. And it gives me that feeling of connecting with others in a low pressure environment. But one thing that I think could have helped me in the past is joining an online community. Now, I'm not just talking about another Discord or Circle or any of the other millions of platforms, but something with live online events where you can check in with a tutor as well as other students. If I wasn't such a raging introvert, I probably would have joined Sada Handy Spanish, which looks great. And I know they even do meetups in Spain. And I know Crew Paul has the Spanish crew, and there are basically plenty of others online. I think being part of a community not only motivates you, but can genuinely make the experience of learning the language so much more enriching. Maybe there's a community of native speakers local to you that have events. Even if you don't yet speak the language, having a sense of belonging to a group will be so much more likely to result in your success, because membership of that group becomes part of your identity. And when who you are is linked to the language, your chances of success skyrocket. If only there was a course centered on how important psychology is on language learning. But before you think that you need to start packing your bags and moving to a Spanish-speaking country to join a community there, check out this next video where I share the lesson I learned from speaking Spanish in Spain for the first time.